Well, good morning. Appreciate Brandon enjoying the reading from Psalm 22, because by the time we get going, we're going to find ourselves right back there this morning. But we're going to start in Matthew chapter 27. In verse 42, he says, "He saved others. Himself he cannot save. If he is the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him." I'm going to ask you, it's not really the point of this sermon, but every once in a while I read scriptures in the midst of things and I think, I get off on this, would they have really believed him? I don't believe it for a second. These people saw him heal the sick. They saw him heal blind people. He had raised the dead. And now they're throwing out another challenge. If he can come down off that cross, then we'll believe him. I don't believe for a second they would have believed. And the great irony is, if he had done what they wanted him to do, it would have ruined theirs and our opportunity to ever be saved from our sin. He trusted in God. Let him deliver him now if he will have him. For he said, "I am the Son of God." Are you seeing any similarities to what was read in Psalm 22? This is that same line of thought. Let him deliver him now, if he'll even have him. You see their questioning of him and his relationship with the Father. Even the robbers who were crucifying him revive him with the same thing. Now we know one of them changed, one of them came to his senses. But at this point, Jesus was absolutely alone with people questioning him. And now from the 6th hour until the 9th hour, there was darkness over all the land. If you're not familiar with how that the clock was kept that day, the 6th hour would have been from sunup. So let's guess that sunup that day was at 6 a.m. It's noon. It is in the middle of the day. And from noon to 3 p.m., perhaps it was, somewhere in that range, there was darkness over all the land. Now this is where I kick in with, I've told you this weekend, sometimes I just close my eyes and I think, it just got dark. At noon, it just got dark. I hope I would have believed then. I would love to think at that point I would say, you know what, we messed up, guys. Ladies, we have really messed up this time. This is different. But that's not what happened there. It gets dark over the whole land, and about the 9th hour, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Jesus cried out with a loud voice. He had the strength to cry out loudly and said, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani." That is my God, why have you forsaken me? You ever put different emphasis on sentences? My God, why have you forsaken me? 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 When I do that with the sentence, it begins to put all kinds of pictures of what he might have meant. You know, it's important for me, and I think it's important for you, for us to remember that Jesus wasn't just God. He was 100% God. But he was also 100% man. And I haven't found a lot of places in Scripture to figure out what the man Jesus thought. We know what he said. We know what the deity the man Jesus taught. But there are not very many places that give us a glimpse into what he thought. We can read his prayer. We can read John 17. But when we read Psalm 22 this morning, I got chills all over again. But I kind of had the advance on me. I knew where we were going with this. We get to see and know what was going on in the mind of Christ, in my opinion, as he was hanging on the cross. And it fascinates me when we do that and we go to Psalm 22. It picks up where we left off in Matthew's account of Jesus on the cross. When Jesus is saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me and from the words of my groaning? Where are you now when I need you the most? Now, we've already read it. Brandon already read it to us. And so, spoiler alert, there comes a point that he realizes and he acknowledges and he will declare to the great assembly, you heard me all along. You were never there. You were always close to my cry. But as a human, Jesus wondered where God is. As God, as deity, he knew exactly where God was. He knew exactly what God was capable of. But in this moment, in this passage, in this point in his mind, he wants to know, why are you so far from me? I need you now more than ever. And today, I don't know where you're at. But I know sometimes there are brothers and sisters that feel like God has not answered a thing I'm praying for. And they are struggling with whether or not they can deal with this, and they want to know, where are you, God? And then on the heels of that, when they come to grips with the fact they just felt that way, or they just said that, they feel guilty. As though their faith is not what it should be for them to even have prayed what they just prayed, or thought what they just thought. And there begins to be this struggle within us. Is something wrong with me because I have just asked God or want to ask God this question? If you ever have struggled with that, if you're struggling with that right now, I want you to know Jesus went through that in his mind at this point. It's recorded. Where are you? Oh my God, I cry in the daytime, but you do not hear, and in the night season I'm not silent. Have you ever had something that bothered you so bad? Yes, you cry all day, but then when you go to lay down at night, you just can't sleep, and you find yourself praying and crying all over again. You think, when am I going to run out of tears? Jesus knew exactly what that was. It wasn't that long before what we're reading right here that Jesus was in the garden alone. He'd gone a little further, you remember, and he prayed. 3 times he prayed. He sweat, as it were, great drops of blood. He pleaded with God. And what was his plea? If it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Jesus knew. He had prophesied. He tried to tell his disciples. He understood what kind of death he was about to die. And as he approached the portal of that punishment, he pled for a way out. And yet, you know, even though he prayed that prayer for an hour-ish, 3 times, he ended that plea by saying, nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. When he said he cried in the daytime and at night he wasn't silent, it had literally, this is his week. Perhaps it's been the last 3 years. Perhaps that's why he had to off go thither to pray alone, as he knew what was coming. But, he says, you know, buts are important. And I hope as you deal with depression, perhaps, as you deal with anxiety, as you deal with the stress of dealing with life's weight, and as you begin to ask and wonder if you can make it or where God is in this, I hope that you understand the word but. Because we have to turn ourselves. If we get anything out of this morning, if you're in that state of turmoil, if you've been there, if you're wondering how to navigate through it, remember the buts. We need to be able to express our doubt and our fear and our confusion. But we also need to express and remind ourselves that God is in control. He is enthroned in the praises of Israel. He deserves every one of them. Our fathers trusted in you. They trusted and you delivered them. He knew the history of Israel. He knew what they had been through. He knew from the beginning of time what God had done to deliver those who would turn their heart to him. He says, you've been there all along. They cried to you and were delivered. They trusted in you and were not ashamed. I infer from this that there was shame on the cross. I know from the New Testament that there was shame in the cross, but Jesus despised that shame. That word despise in the Greek, if I understand right, means to see differently. Instead of looking at the shame of the cross the way that the world looked at it, the way that he might have even looked like, he determined to see it differently. What's the shame of the cross? It's being held up between heaven and earth as a criminal, as someone who deserves to be tortured and die. It's the shame of having your clothes taken away from you and having people gamble for them right beneath you. The shame of everything. He chose to see it differently. He says, our fathers, though, when they cried to you, you heard them. They trusted in you, and they weren't ashamed. But there's still the other side of the coin. But me, I'm a worm, and no man, a reproach of men, and despised by the people. They hate me. We know from his trial, we know from the gospel accounts the physical things that happened to him. We know they spit on him. That we know that they slapped him around. We know that they buffeted him. In the King James, they punched him. That word buffet literally comes from Greek word to rap with the fist. When Isaiah says his visage was marred more than any man, his appearance was messed up. Some of you guys have beards here. I respect that ability. Jesus apparently had a beard. And Isaiah said they ripped the hair out of his face. How did Jesus feel about that? We know the pain. What did he think on the inside? He says, I'm worthless. I'm a worm. What do you do with worms? Tell you what I did with worms. We shock them up out of the ground, we put them in a bucket with some dirt in a little container and take them and we go fishing. And if you're fishing for crappie, you just pinch on a little bit and you put it on a hook. If you're fishing for trout, you might use the whole thing. Worm does not have value to me except for the fact that I might be able to get something that I want with it. Jesus said, I am a worm. I'm not even a man in the mental, the human side of him. He's a reproach of men. The people hate me. They despise me. All those who see me ridicule me. They shoot out the lip. I don't know. I haven't heard that a lot since I moved to California or on the West Coast. But I heard that a lot growing up in Oklahoma. They're just shooting off their mouth. They just say anything. They shoot the lip at me. They shake the head. You know, you can see it now. They're just shaking their head. They're looking at me. They're shaking their head. He trusted in the Lord. Let him rescue him. Let him deliver him since he delights in him. Oh yeah, God really loves you. You see what they're appealing to? You see how they're changing? And this affects even how Jesus viewed the whole situation. But, we got to do a but. You can't keep going down that path. You can't keep thinking what everybody else thinks about you. We cannot get caught up in how the world views us, in how our family views us when they don't approve of what's right and what's true. But you are he who took me out of the womb. You made me trust while on my mother's breasts. What is it about these babies that when they are just beside themselves, you can give them to mom and she can bring them in tight and they stop? Let's go. That's planted in there. Jesus reverts mentally to the security of being married. That's amazing. I was cast upon you from birth. From my mother's womb, you've been my God. Jesus in this moment reminds himself, this humanity that is now battling this torture. God, I've been yours all along, from day one. I ask you, when you go through that time you can't make it, revert back to realizing God is the very reason we have breath. That no matter how bad it gets, God is the answer, no matter how bad. And when you look for that peace, think back to being in your mama's arms. I grew up with asthma. Maybe some of you know what that's like. Thank God I got through it or something. They gave me shots and stuff last year, but I remember as a kid. But it was better. And I kind of thought maybe I wasn't going to die when Mom was there. There's something different. Dad was great, but Dad was kind of a man up. You'll be all right. You're almost done on the lawn. Mom was compassionate. Jesus remembered what it was like to be in his mother. Be not far from me, for trouble is near. There is none to help. God, you're the only one. Nobody else is there to help me. Many bulls have surrounded me. Strong bulls of Bashan have encircled me. I wish I could tell you about these strong bulls of Bashan. I looked up stuff on it, and maybe somebody here has something authoritative and that you can give me confidence in it. I see artist renderings. I see different things. I don't know a lot about these, but I know how Jesus saw them. They gape at me with their mouths like a raging and roaring lion. I've never seen a bull that would remind me of a raging, roaring lion. But that's what these strong bulls of Bashan, this image is presented here. That's an image of, I got no shot. A bull is massive. A lion is, where are you going to go? You can't climb a tree. No, the bull will knock down the wall. The lion can capture it. He says, it's all over. I have nothing. I have no hope. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within me. Listen to this imagery. I'm poured out like water. Water has no substance. You pour, it goes everywhere. He says, I'm falling apart. I have nothing to hold me together. My bones are out of joint. Have you ever dislocated anything? I never have. I hope I don't. My brother-in-law had a skiing accident trying to do helicopters and took his shoulder, went out of joint, so they got him down there. From that day on, we'd be out fishing in the boat, you get hot and you just want to jump in and cool off, he'd do that. And if he don't, and his shoulder hit wrong, he'd go out of joint. This is my boat. How did he hurt when he hung on the cross? I think about the blood. I think about the torture. I think about what the crown of thorns. He says my bones are out of joint. That's what it felt like. My heart's like wax. It's like these candles you ladies do and you light, and they burn for a little while, and then that solid substance just turns into liquid. He says, my heart was strong before. He says, now my heart, it's just melted. I got nothing. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue, it clings to my jaws. A potsherd is just, it's this broken pottery that you unearth out in the dirt. He says, I'm broken. My strength is dried up. My tongue is clinging to my mouth. You have brought me to the dust of death. I don't want to bring back a bad memory for you with a loved one, but I don't want you to miss the imagery here. I've only been with a few people that, as they pass, that this happened to every single one of them, if they were alert. Their mouth gets dry. And you get those little sticks with the little sponge on it that hospice brings, and that you keep dipping in water just because you can't stand to see the tongue and you want it to not clean. Jesus was aware enough to realize that's what was happening. Have you been thirsty before? He's thirsty. He's at the dust of death. For dogs have surrounded me, the congregation of the wicked has enclosed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. We know these scriptures. I can count all my bones. They look and stare at me. In all the ways you pictured Jesus when he was crucified, have you ever realized that when they scourged him, yes, those whips did wrap around front? It's easy just to think of the back and the scourging that took place on his back. But if you're hanging on a cross and your back's all ripped up, you don't see your bones. But if that whip wrapped around your chest and exposed your ribs and it tore away at your legs, that's gross. And yet he says, they look, I can count these bones. I can see this. They look. They stare at me. Is it the people that are staring at him? Is it the fact that his bones look like they're staring at him? What is staring at him? They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. In the midst of this great pain, he realizes what is happening. You remember the Gospels say the soldiers, they took him. They took his garments. They took his chiton and his hemation in the Greek. Those are his outer and his undergarments. How much shame? Absolute shame. One of those garments was without seam. It was woven throughout. And they said, apparently, there was just enough of them to work. They had this one garment. We're not going to tear that. Let's cast lots for it to see whose it will be. For my garments, they cast lots. They gambled, to my opinion, for something that was probably an undergarment. But this one needs to get back to God. But, oh Lord, do not be far from me. Oh, my strength, hasten to help me. Hurry! Hurry, come help me. Deliver me from the sword, my precious life, and the power of the dog. They are dogs in his eyes. The very ones he's dying for have become dogs as he realizes what they're doing. Save me from the lion's mouth and from the horns of the wild oxen. I believe it's the King James that says the unicorn. Save me from what's happening. What happens when you appeal to God for salvation, for deliverance? I want you to know what happened with Jesus in this verse. The rest of Psalm chapter 22 and verse 21, he says, you have answered me. Consider where he's been. He has felt alone. He has felt forsaken. He has expressed he doesn't even feel like his prayers are being heard. He has been tortured. He has been terrified. He has been humiliated. He dies, I believe, at this point as the result of his torture. In this greatest source of need and declared for help, he says, come and save me. And then he says, you've answered me. I believe in Psalm 22, this is the point Jesus died. And you're going to see an immediate change. If this has been depressing to you so far, if it's been overwhelming, I want you to know the narrative changes quickly. And I want you to have confidence about the time that you die in the Lord, because we can also learn not only how to suffer from the Lord, but we can learn what's on the other side of our suffering. Because he immediately says in Psalm 22, and I'm going to jump these because the mouse has stopped. I will declare your name to my brethren. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. He just went from begging God to deliver him, from deliver me from this lion. And he says, you've answered me, and I will declare your name. I want to tell everybody about you. I'm in the midst of the assembly. I want to praise you. You who fear the Lord, praise him, all ye descendants of Jacob. Glorify him, and fear him, all ye offspring of Israel. I love the fact I have to remind you right now in the book of Romans, he says, they are not all Israel who are of Israel. Do you realize today, if you are faithful in the Lord, you are the Israel he's talking about here? And there are people that were members of this nation of Israel when he died that don't have any part or lot in what he just said, because it's faith that makes the difference, not your bloodline. If you're worried about the fact you're the first generation Christian in your family, stop worrying about that. It's not your bloodline, it's your faith line. He has not despised nor abhorred the affliction of the afflicted. It seemed like he wasn't answering. It seemed like he didn't hear, but he heard all along. He has not hidden his face from me, but when he cried, he heard. Jesus said, you heard me all along. You hear everyone. Here's what we learn from that, just side note, time out. Sometimes our prayer is for deliverance. God's answer is for us to stay right where we're at. We're going to gain something through it. I don't know what it is. I can't explain it. And I don't want to say that everything that happens to us is because God put it there. I read the book of Job. I know Satan has a lot of influence in that department. But that doesn't change that we can trust God and that He is there all along to deliver us. And He hears our cries. When He cried to Him, I got to draw your attention real quick to Hebrews chapter 5. In Hebrews chapter 5 and verse 5 it says, "So Christ also did not glorify Himself to become high priest, but He who said to Him, 'You are my Son, today I have begotten you.' As He also says in another place, 'You're a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek, who in the days of His flesh, when He had offered up prayers and supplications, with vehement cries and tears to Him who was able to save Him from death, and was heard because of His godly fear. Though He was a son, yet He learned obedience by the things which He suffered.'" Verse 7 is talking about, I believe, what we just studied. He said there was a time after we get through the theology of Melchizedek, don't lose the fact that in the days of Jesus' flesh, He offered prayers, He offered supplications, He vehemently cried, He had tears. These aren't just cries of the voice, these are tears of cries. This is when you are so upset you just break down in tears. He had vehement cries, He had tears, and He offered those to God, the one who could save Him, and He was heard. Because He had godly fear. God heard Him, but He did not prevent Him from dying. In fact, the answer to His prayer was death. Some of us will talk a little bit briefly this weekend about Lazarus. Remember Lazarus? And Mary and Martha says, "If you had been here, you wouldn't have died." And it's that shortest verse in the Bible there that says Jesus wept. Heard sermons on Jesus wept. I got to admit, there's times I wonder, did Jesus cry because He felt sorry for bringing Lazarus back? Lazarus would have been on the other side enjoying what Jesus is talking about here. The great praise, the relief, the happiness. Jesus wept. He was heard. He died. Though He was a son, yet He learned obedience by the things which He suffered. We learned something about why Jesus died on the cross and why God answered His prayer when He did. Jesus learned obedience then. What does that mean? Was He disobedient before? No. Well then, why did He say He learned obedience? My 2 cents worth, theologically, tear me apart after this afternoon or whatever, correct me, I'm good with it. Jesus never had to obey God before because they saw things alike. One in purpose, one in spirit. The Godhead. Jesus had never been, in my opinion, in a position He disagreed with God. That He had a different will than God had. For now, as a human, and He wanted that life, and He was frustrated with the torture and the attitude of everybody around Him and how they saw Him. And He pled with God for deliverance. This was the first time He had to obey. And He did. Nevertheless, not my will, but Thine. Thine be done. The only way He learned that was through His suffering. I can't ask God then why I have to suffer. I can't ask God why you have to suffer. I can know that we will learn through it when God is kept first. Back to Psalm 22, He says, "My praise shall be of You in the great assembly. I will pay my vows before those who fear Him. The poor shall eat and be satisfied. Those who seek Him will praise the Lord. Let your heart live forever. All the ends of the world shall remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations shall worship before You. For the kingdom is the Lord's, and He rules over the nations." This isn't an American blessing. This isn't a Western blessing. This is for the entire world. For all cultures, all nations, all of this happened for every one of us. And may the world be able to hear this message. All the prosperous of the earth shall eat and worship. All those who go down to the dust shall bow before Him. Even he who cannot keep himself alive. I struggle with this verse. I'll tell you my opinion about it. I look forward to yours. Every one of us would go down to the dust. We're going to bow before Him. Jesus could have kept Himself alive. Matthew says He could have called 12 legions of angels at any time to come and deliver Him. But He didn't. You and I, we can't do that. You and I, we're kind of stuck. We can't keep ourselves alive. Jesus could have kept Himself alive. And He still went that route. You and I, we're going to go down this. We will bow before the Lord. You might be bowing behind a rock if you're not a believer. But you'll be bowing. A posterity. What's that word posterity mean? That's not one I ever use except in this sermon, I think. And occasionally it'll pop up and I'll remember it and I'll try to impress somebody. I understand that that word in Hebrew means to the furthest generation. To the furthest generation they shall serve Him. It will be recounted of the Lord to the next generation. They will come and declare His righteousness to a people who will be born that He has done this. This message of Psalm 22, this prophecy that came so far ahead of time. He says this message will keep getting told to the furthest generation, one generation, the next generation at a time. It will keep getting told. This building is full of generations. Praise God, I love that. That is what it takes. It's sad when there's only one or two generations and they're not any of the young generation. Because this verse right here is talking about you and me. And it's talking about our children and their children. That this message will declare and come and declare His righteousness to us, to them, that He has done this. I'm going to transition at this point. They will come and declare His righteousness. In 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 26 it says, "For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death till He comes." We're about to meet around the Lord's table. We're about to commemorate what we just studied, the sacrifice Jesus made. We are part of the group that was prophesied, that posterity. And how do we help declare it to the next generation? He says, as often as we eat this bread and drink this cup, we proclaim the Lord's death till He comes again. I've had people ask me as I study with them about the Lord's Supper. You know, I've been amazed that not only has, I know some people just do not want to drink out of the same cup. They can start to imagine tearing off a piece of bread off of a loaf and the same thing. But that cup is just a hard thing. But you know what else I'm learning with the religious world at large? It's a hard thing. Is the fact that we do this every week. And you know what I hear? I hear things like this. Well, you do it every week. Doesn't it get old? I mean, it doesn't mean the same. I mean, we only do it at Easter and Christmas, and I'm telling you, when it happens, wow, it's powerful. You know what I have to admit, if I'm honest with you today, or if I'm transparent with you, I should say, sometimes it doesn't mean the same as other times when I came in. But now that's my fault. And you know, it might be a day that I just don't really think I need it, and somebody else in the audience, it may be the day that it is hitting them in a way it hadn't hit them before. Who am I to say? What day? Practically speaking, though, when I talk to people like that, I finally decided to ask them, well, do you guys sing every service? Oh yeah, we love our ministry of music. Oh. Do you preach? Absolutely. Do you pray? Who wouldn't pray? Right now they're about to get on to it. Some of our denominational friends, you can ask them, this collection that we took this morning, now I'm confident I'm going to go out on a limb here. This is the only time it'll be done today. It didn't happen Friday night. It didn't happen last night. One time. Because in 1 Corinthians 16, it says that we're to lay by His sword when we come together. But I'll ask them, do you take a collection, a love offering, every time you come together? Yeah. Does it get old? Why is it all of a sudden communion gets old? Preaching doesn't get old, singing doesn't get old, praying doesn't get old, taking people's money never gets old. But communion, once a week is just too much. Now the alternative view of that is to say, every time we do this on the first day of the week, we proclaim the Lord's death till He comes. You know what? I got to tell you, for my personality, I am grateful for Acts 20:7. It says on the first day of the week when the disciples came together, Paul preached to them. Came together to break bread, Paul preached to them, ready for tomorrow. Why is that important to me? Because my personality is a little bit the type that if I didn't learn that they did it on the first day of the week, I might feel obligated, if I'm going to proclaim the Lord's death till He comes, to do it every day. And then I might be like some that say, well, you need to do it at weddings too, and you need to do it at funerals too, and you need to do it, maybe let's do it at daybreak, and let's do it again at lunch, and let's do it again in the evening. We need to do this all the time because we're proclaiming the Lord's death till He comes. You get the point? When is it not appropriate? How can I say, if the early church did it on the first day of the week, how can I say that's too often? If this is an opportunity for us to proclaim the Lord's death till He comes again, it can't be too often. And much like the Sabbath provided a day of attention and focus, that would have been Saturday under the old law. The communion on the Lord's Day provides us a time, an opportunity to focus every week. To remember that God so loved the world, He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. I want you to consider something that's said prior to this as we draw our sermon to a close in John 3. There was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus. He was a ruler of the Jews. This man came to Jesus by night and said to Him, Rabbi, we know you're a teacher from God. No one could do the signs you do unless God's with you. Jesus answered and said, most assuredly I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Nicodemus said, how can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born? The same Jesus who we love to see John 3:16, or our nation does, at one point, between the goalposts on Monday Night Football, don't want to talk about what he just got through talking about with Nicodemus. Being born again. So how does that happen? Jesus said in verse, surely I say to you, unless one is born of the water and the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. This Jesus of love, this Jesus of hope has given us opportunity to be born again. The whole reason he went to the cross was to give us a second chance. Because all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. We all get a new birth. There's nothing like a baby. It's so fresh, it's so innocent, it's so pure, it's so full of new hope. They haven't done anything wrong yet. We get to be born again through Jesus Christ because of the sacrifice. That's why this gets declared to the next generation. Today we've talked about it all weekend. We need to hear the word, believe it, repent of our sins, change our mindset. Be willing to confess Him before God and be willing to put Him on in a faithful act of surrender to baptism. And if you're a Christian today, you have sin in your life and you desire the prayers of the church, we'd love to pray with you for you. We're about to go and meet together around the Lord's table. This time we're going to be asked to examine ourselves and eat of that bread and drink of the cup. If you desire the prayers of the church as we prepare for this, then we'd love to assist you. If you want to come in obedience to the gospel, we'd love to assist you while we stand.